Welcome back, explorers, to Whoosh Tales, the home of the greatest adventure stories for kids on the entire internet. Every single week, we bring you a brand new English story for children packed with courage and wonder and the kind of excitement that makes it impossible to stop listening. This is episode 4. And if you have been with us since episode 1, you already know that Finn Walker is not the kind of boy who receives a mysterious letter carried by an extinct bird and simply goes back to eating his breakfast. He read those 5 words. The forest remembers your name. And he set down his toast, and he looked out the kitchen window at the Highland Hills, and he said to nobody in particular, which forest. As it turned out, the compass knew exactly which forest. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday at dawn, Finn and Nora and Ember were standing at the edge of the Grey Wood, the oldest forest in the British Isles, possibly the oldest forest in the entire world, a place so ancient that the trees within it had been growing since long before any human civilization thought to write anything down. Most people did not know it existed. It did not appear on any modern map. The few old maps that showed it at all marked it with a single word in Latin that Finn had looked up the previous evening and found meant simply, the remembering place. The trees at the edge of the Grey Wood were enormous. Not tall in the way that proud young trees are tall. These were massive in every direction, their trunks wider than houses, their bark so deeply furrowed and textured with centuries of growth that it looked less like bark and more like the surface of a very old hand, lined with the accumulated evidence of an extraordinarily long life. Moss covered everything in thick, soft layers of deep green and gray-green, and the pale silver green of things that grow where sunlight only reaches in broken, shifting fragments. The air that drifted out from between the trees was cool and carried a smell unlike any Finn had encountered in any of his adventures so far. Not the cold mineral smell of deep ocean or the metallic emptiness of space, or even the familiar pine smoke smell of the Highland Hills he had grown up beside. This was richer and deeper and stranger than all of those. It smelled of earth that had never been turned, of rain absorbed into roots so deep they touched water that had not seen daylight since before humans walked the earth, of bark and moss and leaf mold and the slow chemistry of wood returning to soil and soil returning to wood in the endless patient cycle that had been running in this place since the beginning. It smelled, Finn thought, like time itself had a smell. And perhaps it did. Ember stood at the tree line and did not go forward. She pressed her warm nose against Finn's shoulder and made the low rumbling sound he had learned to translate as I am here and I am watching, but this particular door is yours. Some places, Finn was beginning to understand, required you to enter alone. He looked at Nora. Nora looked at the trees. Then she took his hand briefly and squeezed it once and let go. We will be right here, she said. Every single second. Go. Finn walked into the Grey Wood alone. The moment he passed the first great trunk, the outside world disappeared. Not gradually, immediately and completely, the way a door shuts behind you in a very thick-walled room. The sounds of the Highland morning vanished. Wind, birdsong, the distant sound of Ember's breathing. All of it gone, replaced by the deep interior silence of the forest, which was not really silence at all once you gave it your full attention. It was layered with sounds so slow and low that they registered more as sensation than hearing. The long subsonic creak of enormous branches moving in air that did not move, the deep structural settling of roots adjusting their grip on stone 100 meters below the surface, the patient percussion of water moving through heartwood from root to canopy one slow increment at a time. The forest was speaking, not in words, in the language that existed before words, the language that everything alive uses when it is not performing for an audience, but simply being what it is. The light inside the Grey Wood was extraordinary. It came from above through a canopy so dense and layered that by the time it reached the forest floor it had passed through 10,000 separate leaves and emerged as something transformed. Not sunlight anymore exactly, but something more ancient and more amber, a warm golden-green light that moved constantly as the canopy above shifted in the high wind that Finn could no longer feel at ground level. Every surface the light touched seemed to hold it rather than simply reflect it. The moss glowing softly green-gold, the bark of the great trunks warming to amber and copper, the air itself becoming luminous with drifting motes of pollen and spore that caught the filtered light and held it the way memories hold moments from a very long time ago. Finn walked deeper. The compass pulled him gently forward and slightly left, into the oldest part of the forest where the trees were so large that 5 of him could not have joined hands around a single trunk. His footsteps were completely silent on the deep moss. He tasted the air on his tongue, cool and green and faintly sweet, the taste of photosynthesis happening all around him in every direction, the taste of 10,000 trees breathing out the oxygen that kept him alive as he walked among them. He placed his hand against the bark of the largest tree he had ever seen and felt it beneath his palm. Not cold, not hard in the way stone is hard. There was a give to it, a living resistance, and beneath his hand he felt, or imagined he felt, though he was less and less certain that imagination and reality were as different as he had once believed, a pulse. Slow and deep and absolutely steady. The heartbeat of something that had been alive for so long that it no longer experienced time the way Finn did, the way any human did. For this tree, his entire life from birth to this moment was a single afternoon. Then he heard it. His name. Not spoken. Nothing in the forest spoke in words. It came as a vibration through the bark beneath his hand, as a shift in the quality of the amber light around him, as a change in the texture of the deep forest silence, a change that carried the unmistakable shape of recognition. The forest knew him, not the way a person knows a person, not by face or by voice or by the particular way someone laughs. The forest knew him the way it knew everything that had ever stood beneath its canopy, by presence, by the particular combination of weight and warmth and electrical signature that made Finn Walker himself and no one else. And it had been waiting. Follow, it said without words. And Finn followed. He walked for what felt like an hour, and might have been a minute or might have been a day, deeper and deeper into the oldest heart of the gray wood. And as he walked he began to see what was wrong. It started at the edges of his vision, patches on the bark of trees where the living amber brown had been replaced by a gray so flat and total, it looked not like dead wood, but like the idea of dead wood, the complete and absolute absence of the quality that had made it living. The moss near those patches was gray too. The air near them tasted of nothing, not bad, not unpleasant, simply nothing, the taste of a room where nothing has breathed for a very long time. He touched one of the gray patches and felt coldness that went deeper than surface temperature, a coldness that had no bottom to it, as if the cold extended not just through the wood, but through whatever the wood had been before it was wood, all the way back to the beginning. The gray was spreading from the center of the forest outward. He could see it as he went deeper. More patches, larger patches, whole sections of the canopy above him gone silent and gray, the golden green light dying wherever the gray reached and being replaced by flat white nothing. The forest's voice was quieter here too, the deep subsonic language of root and branch and heartwood fading in and out like a radio signal losing its signal in the mountains. And beneath the fading, he could hear something else, a sound that did not belong in any forest in the world. The slow mechanical grinding of something that consumed rather than grew, that reduced rather than built, that moved through the living wood leaving nothing behind it but gray cold absence. His name was Vorn. Finn did not see him so much as become aware of him gradually, the way you become aware of a smell that has been present for some time before you consciously notice it. He was old, older looking than any living person Finn had encountered, though he had met creatures of genuine ancient age and knew now that age in appearance and age in reality were not always the same thing. He was small and hunched and moved with the particular economy of something that has long since stopped wasting effort on anything that did not directly serve its purpose. His fingers were gray at the tips. His eyes were the same flat gray as the dead patches spreading through the forest around him. He had come to the gray wood, he explained without turning around, without any apparent surprise at Finn's presence, as if he too had been expecting this meeting 3 years ago. He had come because the forest remembered everything. Every secret ever whispered beneath its canopy, every plan ever made in its shade, every truth ever spoken or hidden in its presence over 10,000 years of human history. And Vorn wanted those memories, not to understand them, not to learn from them, to own them, to hold them as power the way you hold a key to a room everyone else needs to enter. He had found a way, he told Finn, to extract the memories from the living wood. The process, regrettably, required the wood to stop being living. He gestured at the spreading gray around them with complete equanimity, the gesture of a man explaining a mildly unfortunate but fundamentally acceptable side effect. Every tree he silenced gave him decades of accumulated memory. He had been working his way inward from the edges for 3 years, and he was almost at the heart now. Almost at the oldest tree at the center of the gray wood. The one Finn had been walking toward. The one whose heartbeat he had felt through the bark of every tree he had touched since he entered the forest. The tree that remembered everything from the very beginning. Including, Vorn said, finally turning to look at Finn with his flat gray eyes. The one you have been looking for. Your grandfather, boy. He came to this forest 17 years ago, long before you were old enough to understand what a compass was for. And what he left here, what he asked the oldest tree to hold in trust until the right person came to collect it. That is what called you here. Not the forest. Him. Everything in Finn went very still. He had carried his grandfather's compass since he was old enough to hold it. He had followed it to the edge of the world and into deep space, into the bottom of the ocean. He had never once questioned where it had come from or why it had been given to him, or what his grandfather had understood that nobody else in Stonehaven had seemed to know. He had simply trusted it. But now, standing in the dying heart of the oldest forest on earth, with the gray cold spreading closer with every passing minute, and the voice of the forest growing quieter, and a small gray-eyed man watching him with the patient attention of someone who has calculated every possible move in advance, Finn understood that the compass had not been a beginning. It had been a message, one that had taken 10 years to arrive. He looked at the gray patches on the trees around him. He looked at Vorn. He looked at the compass in his hand, the new one, the one the silver navigator had given him in deep space, pointing steadily toward the oldest heart of the forest. And he made a decision that was not really a decision because it was the only thing he had ever been capable of doing when something important needed to be done. He ran. Not away. Deeper. Straight toward the heart of the gray wood. Straight toward the oldest tree, moving faster than he had known he could move, his feet finding the path between the roots without his eyes needing to direct them, as if the forest itself was clearing the way, as if every root and stone was moving a fraction aside to let him through. He could hear Vorn behind him, not running, not panicking, simply following with that unhurried certainty that Finn found more frightening than any speed could be. He did not need to run. He had 3 years of preparation, and Finn had 30 seconds. Finn had the compass. The oldest tree was at the precise center of the gray wood, and it was unlike anything else in a forest full of the most extraordinary trees on earth. It was so large that its canopy was the sky above this part of the forest, its roots so vast and far-reaching that Finn had probably been walking on them since he entered the gray wood an hour ago. Its bark was the warm amber red of very old heartwood, and its surface was covered not in moss, but in something that looked at first like patterns in the bark and revealed itself on closer inspection to be writing. Not in any alphabet Finn recognized, but writing undeniably. Thousands and thousands of years of accumulated inscription covering every centimeter of the visible trunk in layered overlapping script. Each layer written over the previous in the same ancient language, the accumulated record of everything the forest had witnessed and remembered and kept in trust since the very first morning of the world. And in the bark at exactly the height of Finn's heart, a hollow, small and perfectly shaped, the size of a compass. He pressed it in without hesitating. The oldest tree exhaled. There was no other word for it. A long, slow breath released from the whole of its enormous body, moving outward through the root system in a wave that Finn felt through the soles of his feet, and then through his legs, and then through his whole body, warm and green, and carrying with it a smell so purely alive that for a moment Finn felt he could smell every season this tree had ever experienced, every rain, every drought, every first morning of every spring for 10,000 years stacked on top of each other in a single breath. The gray stopped spreading. Every gray patch in the forest simultaneously went still, as if whatever had been driving it forward had simply and cleanly lost the argument. Then, slowly and with great deliberateness, the gray began to reverse. Retreating from the edges of the patches back toward their centers, the living amber brown wood returning behind it, the moss greening again, the amber light returning to the air, the deep subsonic voice of the forest strengthening and clarifying as the root network came back to life section by section, the enormous conversation of 10,000 ancient trees resuming in the oldest language on earth. Vorn stood at the edge of the root circle and looked at the compass embedded in the oldest tree and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, quietly and without particular emotion, "You understand that what is in that tree is now sealed. I cannot reach it, and neither can you. Whatever your grandfather left here stays here." Finn looked at him. "I know," he said. Vorn studied him with those flat gray eyes. "You gave up the only thing that could have told you who your grandfather really was," he said. "Does that not bother you?" Finn thought about Thaler in the dark below the ocean for 10,000 years. He thought about the silver navigator sleeping among the stars. He thought about Malachar standing at the edge of the world with 10,000 years of pain and the first person who had seen him clearly enough to speak to what was real in him rather than what was frightening. "Some things," Finn said, "are not mine to take. They are mine to protect." Vorn looked at him for a long moment. Then something happened in those flat gray eyes that Finn had not expected. Something shifted in them, some locked thing coming momentarily loose, and what showed through for just a second looked less like calculation and more like a question. A very old and very tired question that had been asking itself for longer than anyone nearby could know. Then it closed again, and Vorn turned and walked away into the trees without another word, and the forest let him go, and Finn understood that some people were not ready to be reached yet. But that did not mean they never would be. He walked back out of the graywood as the sun was reaching its highest point in the sky above the highland hills. The forest was loud around him now, the deep subsonic conversation of its roots and branches fuller and richer than it had been when he entered, as if the whole living network of the oldest forest on Earth was talking all at once about what had just happened and what it meant. He placed his hand on the last great trunk before the tree line and felt the heartbeat beneath his palm, steady and deep and present. "Thank you," he said to the forest. The amber light shifted around him once in a way that felt, unmistakably, like an answer. Nora was sitting with her back against an oak just outside the graywood when Finn emerged, Ember dozing with her head in Nora's lap, one enormous golden eye opening as Finn appeared. Nora looked at Finn's empty hands. No compass, nothing brought out, and then at his face, and whatever she saw there made her decide not to ask questions immediately. She simply stood up and brushed the moss off her green jacket and said, "Hungry?" "Starving," Finn said. They started back toward the road. After a few minutes of walking, Nora said, without looking at him, "You are going to tell me everything." "Eventually," Finn said, "but not yet." Nora considered this. "Fine," she said, "but I am going to need significant detail when you do." And that is the lesson at the heart of this adventure story for kids, explorers. There will be moments in your life when you arrive somewhere and find something extraordinary, and the most tempting thing in the world is to take it, to own it, to keep it for yourself because it is yours and you found it, and you earned the right to it. And sometimes that will be true and taking it will be exactly right. But sometimes the most courageous and the most important thing you can do is protect something rather than possess it. Leave it where it can do the most good rather than carry it away to where it only serves you. The things that matter most in this world are rarely made more valuable by being owned. They are made more valuable by being tended, by being protected, by being left in the place where they can keep doing what they were put there to do. Hey explorers, if you walked all the way into the living forest with Finn today, give this video a massive thumbs up right now. You have absolutely earned it. And today's comment question is one of our best yet. If a forest as ancient as the graywood could whisper one secret just for you, what do you think that secret would be? Leave your answer below because we read every single response, and we cannot wait to see what you say. Subscribe to Whoosh Tales right now and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single adventure story for kids. Because next week, something that Finn brought back from the forest, something he does not even realize he carried out, begins to glow in the middle of the night. And what it shows him about his grandfather, about the compass, about why Finn Walker specifically has been called to every adventure he has faced so far, will change absolutely everything. We will see you next week, explorers. Hush! That night Finn lay in bed in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about his grandfather. He had a single photograph of him on his bedside table, a man with the same messy brown hair Finn had inherited and the same green eyes looking directly at the camera with an expression that Finn had always read as simply cheerful, but which he now, looking at it in the dark with everything the forest had told him in its wordless ancient way, read entirely differently. His grandfather had not been looking at the camera with cheerfulness. He had been looking at it with the particular expression of someone who knows something important that the person on the other side of the lens does not yet know, and is completely certain that one day they will. Finn turned the photograph face down on the bedside table and closed his eyes. In the pocket of his gray hoodie hanging on the chair beside the bed, something he had not put there and could not account for glowed very faintly in the dark. A green-gold light the color of ancient moss in afternoon sunlight, pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat, like a beginning.